difference here. Driven like dust across desert sand, lady behind left sleeping. She'll never be safe in an outlaw embrace. By now she's woken and weeping. Church bells toll in the old village square, voices to heaven in clear morning air. But I've never known loneliness such as I found there, so far from the arms of my love. A promise or kiss, whispers of this, late nights with candles and wine. I swear by my God, my life I would change if returned to what I left behind. Many in the courtyard would block all escape. I garret these soldiers my life wish to take, for I have no concerns for my own sake. I don't wish more tears for my love. On the stairs come to kick down the door, shots through the window and blood on the floor. By this time tomorrow I'll trouble you no more. I know now I've failed you, my love. In time when I'm just ashes and bone, they'll deliver a letter, box of my clothes. My only crime, leaving you now alone. Oh, my love. Oh, my love. Oh. Hey,
folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show here at the LaurelThirst Tavern with
Public House
with the owner and a decorated musician,
one of the owners,
Lewi Longmire. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks.
I couldn't help but noticing over there this Musicians Emergency Healthcare Fund.
Yes.
We just lost a titan of music in my mind, a guy named Neil Casal, and he's not the only one that has succumbed to manic depression. And I would like you to talk about how the community here supports creative artists, because you know better than anybody that you guys are burning pretty hard.
Well, you mean specifically our local community here in Portland?
Yeah.
The Musicians Emergency Healthcare Fund is specifically like a charity that's set up here in Portland, which is mostly dealing with physical medical bills and stuff like that. It's sort of like we do a lot of benefits, put a bunch of money together with the nonprofit that runs the charity, and then they of course partner and get other resources to get money in so that we can help musicians. Typically it's used in if someone has like some sort of emergency thing, like needs to have surgery or you know,
they're in the hospital for a while.
Yeah. You know, it helps pay bills and defray living costs and stuff, and mostly that. Although now, you know, I know they do have like there's lots of avenues through that to try and get mental health assistance and stuff like that. it's really, that's the sort of thing that really Neil's passing with, it's sad that it would take that to happen, but Neil's passing happened in such a public way that it really brought to light a lot of the mental stresses that like musicians are under, and creative people are a high risk for that sort of stuff. In general, I believe that like if you're a creative person, that you're getting a lot of signals from other places that are not maybe signals that your average like business person gets. I don't know really what that's all about. But Neil's passing happened in such a public way that now there are a lot of resources that are coming out, like public forums, forums of various levels of public and privacy on Facebook, where musicians can like write to each other, reach out for support if they're feeling low. I know Hillary Gleason and some people started a mental health program. I forget what the name of it is.
Backline, maybe?
Backline, exactly.
Yeah.
About just like making sure that those resources are more available for musicians and creative people.
How about your path? I mean, can you talk about how you've... I think with Neil, only from the outside, I was getting close with him, but I was by no means a long-term friend.
Right.
Luckily, I had a chance to do 2 radio interviews with him, and he's in my first book, and my book is dedicated to him. But, he didn't leave enough room for himself. He was such a giver. And when it came time to it, he didn't leave any space for himself and self-preservation. So, I mean, how have you preserved?
Personally,
Yes.
I barely do. I have definitely had my fair share of emotional roller coasters. I have contemplated suicide in my life before.
Yes.
The luckiness of my own personal situation in that deal was that for whatever reason, my immediate friends around me could tell that I was in crisis.
They did. Okay, that's
And
the key. Yeah, that's
that
important.
was the key. Was that like I at least was vocal enough about how overwhelmed I felt that people around me could tell, and in my own personal situation, in my worst moments of dealing with that, when I was at my lowest and had hit sort of rock bottom of that sort of thing, my friends were concerned enough about me that they would speak to me about it. And that to me just got me outside myself enough to be that like, well, it's easy for me to check out. Like I can go, but what am I going to do to them if I do? Like what's the hole I leave? And luckily for me, my sense of duty to my friends and community is bigger than my sense of duty to myself. In that sense, it was a lucky thing because I was like, well, I don't mind if I don't keep living in that situation where my head was at. That I didn't mind if I kept living, but there was no way, having felt the way that my other musician friends passing and my other friends passing, either through suicide or accidents or cancer or what have you.
Absolutely.
The holes that these people leave in our lives and the burden sometimes that it feels like to continue on in their absence was not something that I could in good conscience do to my friends. So for me, when I reached that bottom point, like my friend, one night I was driving a buddy home after a gig or something, and he was pretty drunk. And as I dropped him off at his house, he just started crying. He was just like, you can't go, don't, there's no way, like, I don't want to be here without you, and you can't, And that was like, God, I really realized how self-absorbed my own perspective was of
Right.
like, yeah, of course I'm miserable, and it's terrible that whatever my mental chemistry or emotional health was that made me feel that way. But I was really affecting the people around me, the people who really cared about me and who have supported me all these times, and I just couldn't do that to them. And I sought out like counseling and tried medications and things like that. Whatever. I realized that like I really hadn't done everything I could. So that's speaking to like a certain specific crisis situation. Beyond that, in the long term, I try just lots of self-care in the sense of like, I try to be really kind to myself. I try to not book myself so busily. I'm very I'm not very successful at that.
Well, no,
aspect. Well, 'cause, you know,
do not short, but I get what you're saying.
well, you know, well, that's the thing.
Not
It's
going to
like
overextend yourself.
Yeah, you're booking. You're a musician, so a lot of what you're booking is like months and months out. And you're like, oh, well, I'll do this, and then there'll be these days off, and then I'll do this other thing, and that's how you book it. And then in the months that happen when you're leading up to that time, then all this other cool stuff comes up, like, oh, so and so wants you to play bass for that, and Scott and Ross invited you down to Terrapin maybe for a week, and you know what I mean? You don't want to be like, oh, well, you know, I think for a musician or an artist, it's really hard because I spent my whole life trying to get people to care about the fact that I do this.
Right.
And then someone asking you to do it, saying no becomes counterintuitive. You're like, I've worked my whole life, I've given up everything so that these people want me to be a part of their music. It's hard to say no. I'm learning now that, like, if I overextend myself and I don't allow myself enough time for rest, you know, like I self-medicate a fair amount. I don't really drink or anything, but I smoke marijuana regularly. And to me, it's medicine. It works for me. I can still get my stuff done. I'm on point. I'm present. But it also, like, keeps me from getting anxious or whatever. But I know that if I don't take enough time to do, like, smoke a joint in the bathtub and just have a day where I'm doing nothing and not pressuring myself to, like, answer those emails or write that song or learn that material, that I have to, like, set it up so that there's time off. Otherwise, it doesn't help anyone. It's not helping me. I'm not a good friend to my friends. I'm not a good partner to any partners. And I'm not a good musician if I don't have the energy to come in with my light to a project. You know what I mean? It doesn't do any good to just fucking show up. I mean, it does, I guess. You could phone it in and people can totally maintain careers like that. But for me, like, I don't really want to be a part of something. If you're inviting me to be a part of your music, I don't want to go do that unless I can do it well and bring really something, the best of myself, unless I can bring the best of myself to that project. And I know I can't bring the best of myself if I'm too tired or if I'm, you know, like, I just came from a 6-week period of incredible activity. Two different tours, into a big production show that happened 3 nights in a row, into a week of recording at a theater in Eastern Oregon of 14-hour days every day, you know. And then I came home from that, though, and I basically hibernated for 4 days and just didn't. The biggest problem with that is finding, I think, the space to allow yourself to do that, to where you're not gonna, like, feel guilty about it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
because
there's a lot of stigma with stuff in America, and even though I just did 6 weeks of work, for me to, like, lay in bed for 14 hours a day for a couple of days and not answer the phone, other people are like, oh, well, that's massive, you know, depression, or you're, like, isolating yourself now. But it's actually like, no, I'm just recovering. You know what I mean? I've been busy. And there's no shame. There's no shame, particularly if most of the time you really get stuff done. There's no shame in, like, having days where you're just like, I'm not going to return that text.
Yeah, in many ways I feel that decompression is absolutely necessary after you're road dogging and you're singing for your supper. It's essential. But did the music find Lewi Longmire?
Definitely.
Explain, was there a demarcation or a point when you recognized that you were totally taking the insecure path and
if there was any clear demarcation, it happened before anything else had a chance to show up. Like, I started messing around with my father's musical instruments as a child, and started playing music in earnest, like really learning how to play guitar at like 13 or 12 or something, and then had bands in high school and stuff like that. And it was just the only thing that I ever did that really just made me feel complete and whole and just made me tingle all over all the time. And so I always kind of pursued that. I always had music in my life. I did go to college. I didn't finish, but I went to college and tried to study first music, but then I was a horn player, like a French horn player, which I didn't really even enjoy, and I certainly wasn't any good at. But getting a music degree didn't seem to be any path that I wanted to follow. And then I was into chemical engineering for a while because I was good at it. I'm good with math and stuff like that. It's not that far from music. But then, that was the early 90s, and I was like, the concept of like green jobs and stuff hadn't come up yet. So I'm like, oh, chemical engineering. What am I going to go to work for Dow and make the next napalm? This is not
Right.
And sometime around that time, one of my bands I was in started touring, and I just ended up dropping out of college and never really looking back.
Is that how you met cats like Tim Bloom on the road?
Yeah, totally. We used to. That band was out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were.
What was the name of that group?
Horribly named as Apricot Jam. We were a frenetic acoustic jam band.
I love it.
That kind of. We were doing kind of what the Avett Brothers did later to much more success. We didn't have a drummer.
No percussion at all, or
no percussion, but our bass player is fella James White, and maybe you've run across him. He used to play with Eric McFadden and did some work with Tom Waits actually at some point. And he was very percussive on an upright.
Dick.
Heavily amplified upright, lots of effects. I was playing an acoustic guitar, but through a Fender Twin and a full effects rack. And
it was
stuff.
frenetic acoustic jam music.
Yeah.
With lyrics? Or?
With lyrics, oh yeah, fully. And we had moderate success. We toured all through the western states. I was living in New Mexico, where I'm from, and we did High Sierra a couple of years, and did a bunch of runs opening up for the Mother Hips. We were managed out of an office in San Francisco that managed the Mother Hips and Jam Bay, which was Matt Butler from Everyone Orchestra's old band. And so an early sort of introduction to those people as we were all youthful and coming up. But so I went on tour with that band and such, and that band eventually broke up after moving up here to Portland. And I just started playing with a bunch of people around here. But ultimately, I never... it's interesting that I ended up becoming like an owner of a pub as well, a music venue as well, because I don't really... My sense of myself is that I don't really feel like I have the greatest work ethic. Like when it comes to like working jobs, which I've rarely ever done. I've been lucky. Some of the jobs I have had were like, I spent over 15 years working in like record stores when that was still a thing that was very viable.
Absolutely.
And the access to music was amazing. I don't feel like I've got the greatest work ethic to something that is not, that I'm not intimately connected to.
Mm-hmm.
Music, I'll work all day long, every day for almost no compensation. But if you give me any other kind of job and be like, you have to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I just don't know if I'm gonna.
Yeah, you're channeling Jake Fine. No, I mean, but at the same time, with the public house, you're fusing that with music. I mean, you have to
Right.
you have to bring in cats. You have to. I mean, it's all kind of flowing together.
Right. That thing ends up being. It's interesting that it exists in a legitimate business place, but my ability to find the fire for it is that I know that every person who goes up there and has a good time at a show, or every musician that is able to get that extra $50 to get them down the road or whatever, like that I can get behind. I'll do that forever. I can get behind that. I don't work, as long as I'm making enough money to eat, that's whatever it is. But honestly, I've always said this analogy to my friends. If you gave me some job and you're like, I want you to sit in this cubicle for 40 hours a week, and we'll give you 2 weeks off.
Right.
Cubicle for 40 hours a week, doing something that you don't understand or care about. Do it for 2 years, and we'll give you $2 million. I could not do that. I don't have... There's something in me that does not have the mental capacity, even for the
money.
The good of like getting this cash infusion that I could maybe live the rest of my life off of, if parlayed correctly. I just don't have that.
Would you be able to say, well, I could do anything musically if I just suck it up for 2 years?
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. It's hard to say. Like, it has to be something that is real.
The fire has to be there.
I have a buddy who turned down Shania Twain as her, they offered him the chance to be her guitarist, and he's a brilliant guitarist. And he was just like, his quote, I think, was like, I think that could change a person, and I can't see that changing me into anything I want to be.
Wow.
You know?
Profound.
And that's just like, that's kind of how I am. Like, I'll play gigs for free if I love the people and love the music and everything. But I'm not the sort of person who's like, hey, put together a wedding band and we'll give you 10 grand to do this wedding. I can't do it. I just can't. It's not. And believe me, I know it's a place of privilege for me to have reached to be able to turn down things like that. You know, and I would do it perhaps if I was more desperate, but whatever. In the situation I'm in now, things have worked out to where I don't need to do anything that doesn't really feel meaningful to me. And that's lucky. I feel lucky and I'm very thankful for it. But as far as like the chance of, was there ever a time when I could have really done something else? And, you know, that there was a demarcation that like, now music is my thing. I don't think that ever could have like.
Actually, my whole thing was where maybe your family or significant other was like, why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep going on this insecure path of music? Why don't you do something more? Why don't you conform?
Right. I'm lucky in the sense that I never have taken much. I don't put much value on like capitalism. It just never appealed to me. You know, like. I'm not a big stuff guy, and I'm not a big need to spend money. Like, everything that I ever spend money on, the only things I really, like, covet and want are, like, musical gear things, which then I can buy now because I write them off of their tools and they get used, and it's like, you know, like, I've just never really needed, I've never derived security from, like, that sort of financial thing. I've always felt that there's this thing where like people do this, like there's an equation of time and money. And to me that equation doesn't fucking exist. Like there's no amount of money you can use to buy back time that you've spent. And if it's a one-way equation, then it just doesn't work. I would rather spend my life living a Spartan existence, doing things that feel meaningful to me with people that I enjoy being around and are inspired by, than I would living a totally luxurious and cush life that didn't have those sort of experiences.
Lewi, how in your mind, being that you've been on the circuit for quite a few years, how has the significance of music changed in our culture?
I don't know if the significance of music has changed overall.
I should say live music.
Live music. Here's the thing. There was a point where like the live music and everything was was big in mainstream culture, where like, you know, where it felt like the above board culture was like everybody loves Zeppelin. You know what I mean, or whatever.
Well, I'm even going to. I want to throw this out there. The Holt Center. I'm not sure if you ever played there in Eugene. They had Garcia Band, Santana, Merle Haggard, real country western, psychedelic rock, and now it's like total symphonic. I guess what I'm just talking about is the idea that when I'm at a gig, maybe not here, but there are times where I'm at gigs and I'm just letting the body dance because music is made for dancing.
Right.
And people come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, you're blocking my view. Can you sit down?" And I said, what the heck has happened here? How have we gotten to the point of letting the body dance to stare at somebody's facility and chops and sit there idly by? That's kind of what I'm trying to hit on.
Oh, okay. Well, I think for that thing, like, those are societal things, right? You know, in one sense. Like, if you like go to a show in Europe, if you went to go see Led Zeppelin play in Europe, by and large, people would be sitting, politely listening. You know what I mean? Europe has a much different culture of that.
Interesting.
In general, like I see a lot of like rowdy bands I know. I mean, I'm sure there are club shows too, but there's a lot more likelihood. Like I know a lot of rock and roll bands that have gone and toured Europe, and it's disquieting for them because everybody sits and listens quietly and then applauds when the song is over in a way that is not what they're used to. Not good. There's no qualitative.
No.
But the thing that I think people forget, like if you're looking at this thing, if you talk about the classic of like our kind of genre, if you talk about the classic originators of like your Allman Brothers and your stuff like that, going back to the 70s, you would think you would characterize it that everybody was just like, freaking out at all the shows. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Was freaking out at all the shows, dancing like crazy and stuff like that. But people forget.
Yeah.
The Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore East.
Right.
The Fillmore East was a seated venue with no alcohol. People were not dancing at the Fillmore East.
I got to talk to Jerry Pompili about that. He was Bill Graham's right.
Well, maybe. No, maybe they were, but in general, like if you look at pictures of that, like Mad Dogs and Englishmen, it's seats, which creates a different sort of thing. And I'm just saying that, the beauty about back then was like it was not tied to alcohol, and everything with music in America today is pretty much tied to alcohol. If you don't have an alcohol license, you're not making enough money to make an overhead to keep a place alive to be able to have shows, which is unfortunate. But it was different back then, and I think also, so people weren't drinking, what they were doing was taking psychedelics and smoking tons of weed, which puts you into a different sort of if you are dancing, it's like, you're more likely to be dancing if you're on mushrooms than you are if you're on Jaeger bombs, you know what I mean? I think, unless, some people, I don't drink much, so I don't.
You can go. I just, what it comes down to is the idea, especially with younger cats. I mean, I just would love you to talk a little bit about the spiritual quality of music, because it's a lot of music today is manufactured. It's synthetic, and it's being digital beats that are being crunched into the ears of my daughters and younger generations. And I want you to just riff on the spiritual quality of music. The idea of you saying, I'm not playing the wedding gig for 10 grand. I don't have to, because I'm going to play. I'm lucky that I don't have to do it. I'm going to play the gigs that I get off on spiritually.
Right. Well, and that also, that comes with the caveat of I would play a wedding for someone I cared about deeply, personally, because that's a thing. But but part of that deal is I don't want to do gigs where the music is a background to some other thing. The music is not important at the wedding. It shouldn't be. The wedding's fucking important. You know what I mean? Who cares? Play the Macarena, play Mustang Sally. It's great. And, but it's not my bag. I don't want to put on the suit and go do the thing or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But spiritually, I think, mainstream music and the people who are trying to make money by doing a pop culture thing are doing this digital thing. And they're doing, and they're pushing the digitized beats and whatever it is that maybe you or I might find less appealing about music and less spiritual. I can't speak to that. The kids who are, taking ketamine and dancing to bass nectar, I don't know, maybe they're getting something out of it that they can't get anywhere else. I can't speak to that. They're not my tribe in a certain sense, you know what I mean? Not to create an us and them situation, but I don't understand those sort of things, but I also don't want to dismiss it. But as for what I would sense that you and I is looking for in a spiritual connection in music, I feel that's always there. It maybe is harder to seek out nowadays, and you have to actually be consciously looking for it, but it is there. It is something that as commercial music gets even more and more commodified, and shows and venues have more sort of stipulations around them, I feel like there's always a backlash to that sort of thing. And if you go into the smaller venues and you seek out the right kind of people, that there are still experiences like that everywhere to be had by that. I play one of my most successful projects that I'm part of right now is behind a 26-year-old songwriter, Taylor Kingman, who is the most deep, old soul kind of cat. I don't know where he came from, how a guy that young writes the sort of stuff.
He just has an old soul, yeah.
He's got an old soul. And is totally, also has the aesthetic to where he also is dedicated to the spiritual part of it and the depth of it, and is not into just hey, let's take this and make a bunch of money off it and get big. It's not about ego gratification. It's about serving whatever magic gives him that music and allows it to flow through him. He wants to serve that. And I think there's always gonna be places like that. I think it's easy to look at something and just be this is the trend and therefore this is what's going on. But, you know, you've talked to way more people than I have, so you've got a lot more information on this. But I remember, I grew up in New Mexico, so I knew all these people
Right.
who had moved to New Mexico in the late 60s to start communes. I was friends with the guys who started like New Buffalo and the people who came out originally with the Hog Farm and Wavy and Hugh and those guys.
You knew Wavy at that time?
I didn't know him, but I mean I've met Wavy.
He's a dear friend. He's a dear friend. Yeah, I love Wavy. Yeah.
You know, I
Wait,
remember his wife chasing him around looking for his teeth a few times. But
I mean, it was in Taos or something. Taos.
Yeah. It's south of Arroyo Seco and that northern New Mexico. But I knew some of the other people from that scene, and when I was a teenager, I would go and hang out with them. They could tell right away, me at 16, that I'm like, this kid's our people. We got to get him up to the house and hang out. And I got interesting perspectives at that time. And one of the things that like my buddies would tell me was like, hey man, like we were into the Airplane. We fucking loved the Airplane, but nobody liked White Rabbit. Nobody liked Somebody to Love. Those weren't the tunes that we were into. Like, even the Airplane didn't hardly play those tunes. They were commercial hits that got them into a situation where they could continue what they were doing, but they didn't think those were the pinnacles of their work. That was just like, that was their sort of foray into the commercial world, and it worked for them. But they didn't think that, like, Somebody to Love was the best song that they ever did, you know? The true fans were into, like, no, man, the Ballad of You and Me and Pooh Neal is where it's at, you know?
There's also a distribution thing. I mean, you just sparked my memory when you talked about the original Fantasy records with the Gollywogs, with Creedence Clearwater. The Saul Zaentz, they didn't negotiate all that well, and basically all the money that Creedence made off those hits fostered so much amazing jazz on the Fantasy label.
Right.
So it was like now today everything goes to one person. I look at a lot of music today, and it's the accompanists are in the back and the leaders up front. And to me, as a conversation, music is the ultimate conversation.
Right.
And that's all I want to get to. I don't get off on anybody wanking it up there or some sort of celebrity up there. I just want to see a beautiful musical conversation, whether it's honky funk like Jimmy Russell and those cats, or whether it's wild acoustic music, or
right.
But it's the conversation. That's the ultimate thing, and that may not be. And going back to Neil, I hung with him in July before Chris Robinson Brotherhood show, and he openly said, he's like, I'm broke. And you would think that somebody in his shoes, right, with the amount of and that's the thing, because other cats have told me, when you just because you have a sold out venue, that money's already going into the next recording project.
Yeah,
that money's going to lawyers and managers, and so I guess here's the point: the cat you were talking about, the singer,
Taylor Kingman, yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that it's really hard to get ahead. Nobody's getting ahead making creative music today.
No, not at all.
And the artist cultivation of Joni Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen, those guys, they didn't have radio-friendly hits for 2 or 3 albums, so there was a cultivation with the industry. So that's changed. But that's the demoralizing part, is that people would look at Neil and say, I want to be where he is, if they were 10 years, 15 years younger.
Right.
But he really was broke.
The other thing that I wonder, and I don't know anything about this, but I wonder about stuff like that, is like, is also like, are people like this cat Taylor that I'm working with, being that he was born into the world where this technology was already different, if they're going to be able to view it in a different way and not look for it in the ways that we did. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a saturation of material now.
And also just like what you think is going to be possible. Because, I mean, like back in the old days, even when I was just in a self-released touring jam band, you would sell enough CDs if you printed an album to pay for the manufacturing of the CDs and to pay for the next one. You could do it. It would totally, it may take a while, but you were getting like $13.50 out of every, $15 CD you spent. So it was easy to at least keep the thing going. That's how DIY punk people were able to do it. If you got out there and just sold your stuff, you would make enough money to keep producing this stuff. And that's ultimately what you want. It's not about like, I don't think Neil Casal wanted to be rich, but he fucking wanted to have enough money to keep doing what he's doing without panicking. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I have to say, like,
that's interesting. The panic there.
It also just like, but any sort of insecurity or difficulty that he would have felt about that sort of thing would have also been fostered by the fact that he was raised in a world where when we were growing up, you could be the next Beatles. It was possible. You could look at the people who were around you, the next generation up. When I was 18 and starting to sneak into bars and looking at the people in their mid-20s who were playing it, it was a tangible thing where it's like, we could do this. Like, anyone can do this.
There were 3 TV channels.
Right, exactly.
There wasn't the saturation of. I mean, if you got onto Ed Sullivan, you were gonna make it.
Well, and the concept of like, I'm 48 and I'm from rural New Mexico, so literally, I got to see, the 80s. I started playing in bars when I was like 16, so like 86, 87, and the first video rental stores started showing up around 84, 85. Cable TV, MTV, all that sort of home thing, like what you're talking about, 3 channels. And not as a qualitative analysis, but there were no drunk driving legislations.
Bill Vitt, the late Bill Vitt, said that Mothers Against Drunk Driving had a profound impact on live music.
And it's not like, what are you going to say? You don't want people fucking dying out there.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's like in the early 80s, there was nothing else to do. You went out to a movie, or you went hiking, or you went to a bar, and the bar was more fun with music because you could dance and let loose and stuff like that. Like, they'd either have a jukebox, and you're up against that, or you have live music. There's nothing else really going. Even to have TVs in bars was not that, because there were only the local channels. Who wants to watch just Walter Cronkite?
Oh, you nailed it. You're nailing it. No, it's the amount of bands that have been eliminated for extra TVs now is astounding.
Yeah, and so
we've changed from an auditory society to a degree, in some ways, also to a very visual society as well.
And you're also, if you're getting into the big picture thing, you're dealing with a society, the capitalist American society, where there are factions at the top who are working very hard to keep you feeling unsatisfied, because it behooves them for you to buy stuff and want stuff and play into that system. And that's something that they started messing with, like, I think probably right after the war in a big way. There were earlier, obviously it's been going on a long time. But after the war, when we really started getting to be a consumer society, they really started ramping up.
World War II?
Yeah, World War II. That they really have started ramping up, like, the psychology of making you feel like you need this extra stuff. And that includes things by, like making it so that you feel unsatisfied, so that then you're like, oh, well, maybe I'll get the TV, or maybe I'll get if I get a bigger car, and then to where, like, it used to be just the concept of like an evening out with your friends at a club or at a theater would be like, that's enough. You know what I mean? We've developed into a society where, honestly, there are people who are huge music fans, huge live music fans. They can't take more than 90 minutes of their favorite band live. Before 45 minutes in, they're fidgeting. They paid $30 to be there, and they're like, is this over yet? You know what I mean? We don't have the attention span to, like, people always talk about the most legendary of the Bill Graham shows, where they go in for the last show on Saturday, the late show at the Fillmore, and not come out till close to dawn or whatever like that.
It'd be a New Year's run with the Blues Brothers.
If you did that now, people wouldn't even want it. That's
interesting.
You could give the people an all-night show, and unless they're really hopped up on something, they're like, 12:30, they're like, okay, well, we saw the ball drop, I'm going home.
It's funny. The thing
that
I crave maybe is not what the majority And we're pointing to that, but you're talking about spiritual materialism. That's what these people are good at. I mean, they want you wanting more.
Exactly.
They want you want more material stuff as opposed to actually touching. I guess this is Lewi. I mean, we're waxing philosophical here, but
of course, that's what music is.
That's right. That's what the Jake Feinberg show is. Can you talk about ultimately dropping from your head, playing music? When you're able to drop from your head to your heart to what John Molo refers to as the primordial gut or the soul.
Oh, man.
That's the space.
Well, I'm searching for it constantly in every gig.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like I feel like, I don't know if every musician has this going on, but I'm always searching for that, and yet feel like I'm always in my own way. Like I'm always.
So how do you get out of your own way?
Well, for me personally, I like to smoke reefer when I play. It helps me forget the audience.
Yep.
For some reason, some people it would make them totally paranoid about it. But for me, it allows me to just like, okay, it's this note, man. This note is amazing, and then the rest of the time is like, when I'm not actually playing the music, is about finding ways to remain spiritually grounded. Like I try to meditate. I try, once again, talking about those periods of where like taking rest and stuff like that. I feel like for me, because I'm just kind of a heady character, I spend as much time thinking about how I want to be present and how I want to look for that space within myself to be open. I spend as much time thinking about that as I do running scales on the guitar. Like, to me, that's every bit as important. Like, my technical facility is only going to be as good as my ability to be truly present and open in that moment anyway. And so I spend a lot of time just thinking in ways that, like, to remind myself to not get psyched out by the instant insecurities that will pop up. And like, you be on stage and like, I mean, this still happens, but I'm trying to diminish it. But I'll be like playing some packed show and I see somebody leave at the back of the room. And in the back of my head, I'm like, we suck. That guy, they're leaving because we're terrible.
Right.
I did something wrong.
You're drowning in paranoia.
Exactly. Even though there's like 200 other people who are like totally dancing. I watch like one guy with his frown on his face and they walk away. But, so I spend a lot of time just trying to remind myself of like, you don't know what the hell's going on.
No.
This happened actually fairly recently. And this is why I know that it's all worth it and that you got to just step out of your own way. For the TK band, the Taylor Kingman, TK and the Holy Know Nothings, we did a little tour last May and we ended up, we had a gig at Terrapin. We got bumped into being the brunch show because somebody rented out the bar venue for the night. We were supposed to have a night show and we got bumped to the brunch and we're already like, oh great, we're like really dark honky tonk band. What's that going to be like playing at 1 PM?
And that was in the bar.
In the bar.
Oh, I love that.
And
I love that bar, man.
Yeah, totally killer.
Yeah.
But I'd never seen a daytime show there or whatever. And our music is like, they call us like the Black Sabbath of honky tonk. Some of it's pretty dark and some of it's pretty heavy.
Jeez.
And I'm like, how's that going to go over with the little kids dancing around? And there's no Dead songs, so, But so we go and we're setting up and we're playing the show and we're doing it. And you've been to Terrapin, obviously. Like in the bar, there's a rack right in front of the bar, or right in front of the stage. And there's a family. What appears to be a family is at the stage, and the matriarch is just like this.
Stoic.
Just kind of looking at us and just kind of being like, and what would look like her eldest son or whatever has sunglasses on, and he's like, can't see his eyes, and he's just like this, leaning on the thing, and he's drinking Bloody Marys. And everybody in their party, there's like 5 or 6 of them, and they just look really like, they're looking at us, but they just look like, in my mind, they're going like, what is this? And I'm, we're playing and we're doing our best and we're trying to share, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, these people hate us. Like they came in for some good time or whatever. They want to hear fucking Sugar Magnolia or whatever, and we're playing like this song about this guy selling somebody to someone else. You know, it's like really dark. And I'm just like, wow, we're, you know, the insecurity pops up and you're like, we're failing what someone is looking for in this experience. And be it whatever it is, we're artists or whatever, that's fine, but you're affected, we're empaths, and we're affected by the vibes of those around us. And I'm like, wow, man, this is the worst. And we finish our show, and the woman comes up to me, and she's like, thank you so much for your music. I'm like, oh.
Wow.
I'm like,
wow.
And she turns to me, and she goes, I just lost my husband last week. And she's like, we've been in crisis mode, and we're miserable, and the whole family's together for these memorials and stuff. But we woke up this morning, and we're like, we're not going to succumb to this. We're going out. We're going to the bar. We're going to go hear some music. And the whole family just thanked us profusely for what we were giving and how much it helped them through that day. And she even she apologized to us. She's like, it must have been terrible to look at us while you were playing because we are so sad and we know it, but we really needed this. And things like that.
What an absolutely insane story.
Exactly.
So really, the message like, there, you don't know, you have to know what you don't know. It's a
You have no idea what's actually going on, and it's complete hubris for you to think that you have any idea what's going on in anyone else's head.
But that really that not that crystallized anything for you, but that made it again a reinforcement to say everything is worth it.
When those things happen, and they do happen, where like, you know, it's just like there's the famous. I mean, aside from the famous story where they were playing the carousel or whatever, and Jerry threw Phil down a flight of stairs or whatever because he thought they played so terrible, and then they listened to the tapes and they're like, well, that's the new record. So, Magic. I mean, to know that you don't know is the key.
That's what Terry Haggerty said. That's what is it, Sophocles said that? I forget. You know, you have to know what you don't know.
Or at least know that you don't know. You know what
that's
I mean?
Right. That's right.
Because, and I think the key is just finding that nugget within yourself of where, like, you know you're doing it for the right reasons, you know you're doing it for love, and you know you're a part of this energetic interaction where you are consciously trying to put out good into the world. If those people in front of us were hating everything we're doing, it still doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
It's like with any form of communication. You can only communicate in your most honest and true form. You cannot deal with how someone takes your communication. You know, I'm sure in every personal relationship, all of us have had these situations where, like, you try to be totally honest, you try to be totally forthright, somebody still thinks you're a jerk. I'm sure there are people out there who thought Mother Teresa was a terrible human being because she treated them poorly because of something else. There's always got to be, you know, you can't. Someone else's perspective is not what you can concern yourself with. It takes an incredible amount of work to be grounded and centered into doing this thing that we do of playing music in public and trying to put it out there. And I think it's just, this all goes back to the original talk about, like, thinking about the pressures that would make someone like Neil take their own life. I can only imagine that those mental feelings are compounded by paranoid perceptions of feeling like you're not living up to something else, to someone else's deal of what you should be. If you're not living up to your own, I don't know what to say. The beauty of that is you can always change your own perceptions. If you're not living up to your own, to where you want to be, you can either adjust your life to try and do that or adjust your perspective of where you want to be. The beauty about the whole thing, and not that it's easy, you know, it's not like you could tell Neil, like, hey, get over it, change, you know, and change your mind, feel better. But ultimately, you can't change anything that happens to you. You can only change how you feel about what happens to you. And my trip, what I'm trying to do in my own personal life, music and beyond, is just to try and cultivate as much gratitude and feeling like that it's a world of not plenty, what is the word? Abundance. And just that I just choose to believe that. you know, as much as I can. There are forces that try to make me not believe that, you know, or feel like that they try. And there's people try and put their trips on you. Society wants you to be, you know, unsatisfied. They want you to fit into their box or whatever. I just spend most of my trying to, that I just decide that I want to be happy. You can throw at me whatever you want. I'm still going to try to be happy. That's all I can do. You know what I mean? I feel like with music, that's one of those things. Like, was there a chance where I ever could have had any other job except music? I don't think so. And I'm lucky in that, like, even as far as my concept of doing music, people will say I'm like a local legend or a luminary of Portland these days. I didn't set out for any of that. I never looked at any goal of like, how can I do this music thing so that when I'm 50, I'll be like able to support myself and be able to like feel like I can sit back on the respect of my peers or whatever. I never looked at that. I'm lucky in the sense that like I was not paranoid about making money. I just felt like, man, if I just put my head down and do what I do, I'll probably not starve. I got a good community of friends. I don't think I'm going to starve. And that's ultimately all I'm worried about. And I just kept moving towards what felt right at this moment. What seems like the path of honor and the path of growth and learning and depth at this moment. And I just followed one cobblestone to the next of that path and found myself here without trying. Like, I never would have bought a venue or a pub. I never would have imagined that. This thing was like a thing that I was involved in helping them run, and the universe said, oh, you seem to have dedicated your life towards keeping this thing going. Maybe you should own it.
I can't help but think, I mean, Todd Barkin, the great Keystone Corner Club owner for so long, and not the rock club, but the jazz club, his motto is take care of the music and the music will take care of you.
Exactly.
And I think that you are the epitome of that, and we're going to have to leave it there, but we have not even touched on the fact that this cat, one of the most humble multi-instrumentalists, I mean, you are gigging, you've become...
I do about 200 to 250 dates a year. And didn't
locally.
I didn't even start going on tour.
So you don't even have to road dog it. You're just local gigs.
Yeah, I road dog it now, but until 2019, I pretty much just stayed at home. I hadn't done a van tour in 20 years, till the ones I did this year.
Well, bring your band down to Tucson, and we'll catch another hang, Lewi.
We'll do it.
It was such a ball, man. Thanks for hanging.
Thanks, Jake.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.